Hello and welcome back to Delta Force. It's the final week of my 4-week challenge where I'm shooting for 15 million Technic Alloy while playing only one match per day. And we are still completely behind schedule. You know, between episodes I was considering lowering the goal to 10 million, but I figured that would just be too easy, and even though I'll probably lose the challenge, at least I can say I played fair and square and saw it through to the end. And hey, maybe I'll clutch up and make some crazy money in the next 7 raids. I've got no idea how this will play out because most of the raids haven't happened as of this recording. But enough talking. Like the video if you enjoy, subscribe so I can play video games for a living, and let's get straight into game number 1. In Raid 1, I was praying for a spawn close to the admin building where all the good loot is, but there are only 2 spawns that actually put you right next to it, and I wasn't lucky enough to be placed in one of those areas. Thinking back, I probably could have made it to admin before anybody else if I hurried from my spawn point, but the course of action I actually decided on still made for a fairly exciting game. After reaching this barracks area, I looked around for any good loot and found this car battery that took up a lot of space, but was worth a decent chunk. However, I also picked up these extra 9x19 rounds, which will come into play later. Inside this building here, I found 2 separate computers that gave me military intel and a RAM stick, the latter of which should be worth way more in this day and age, just saying. And then things got interesting as I started hearing footsteps from the tunnel I spawned in. Unfortunately, I didn't hit a headshot with my sniper, meaning whoever was sitting in that tunnel was still alive and well. And worse than that, they had friends. However, given the fact that I was on the easiest map on the easiest difficulty, I was pretty sure these weren't real people, and Delta Force's bots have a habit of attacking one at a time, so it was only after I knocked down one operator that another started firing shots my way. And after tending to my injured arm and a little bit of patient waiting, the whole team went down pretty quickly. But of course, another one showed up relatively soon. And at a certain point, another team arrived, and things got so confusing that I had no clue who was on what team. Long story short, I spent a lot of time stealthily moving between the tents in the area, taking shots where I could and doing my best to survive. And when it came down to a 1v1, I managed to finish off my opponent with my very last magazine. Yeah, if it hadn't been for the ammo I'd found earlier, I'd have been toast. But after looting, I was left with just 5 minutes to run across the entire map to an extraction point, which luckily ended up being possible. In the second raid, I once again did not get either of the 2 best spawns to approach the admin building, but I was still pretty close and decided to just give it a shot. Of course, I ended up getting distracted by some of the more easily accessible loot, like this PKM that I couldn't fit in my inventory. I need a better backpack. But I did find this gold tier army watch in a bird's nest, so it wasn't a complete waste of time. Eventually, though, I mustered up enough courage to enter the admin building, and while the place was crawling with guards, there was a distinct lack of other players. I wasn't sure if I was the only one there, or if everyone else was just being super sneaky, but I was able to get a lot of looting done without much interference. As I spent more time in the facility, I began to realize that I might actually be the only one there, so I ditched stealth for speed, activated the elevator extraction point, which I actually haven't used before, and headed for the exit. Before leaving, I noticed this box here, which is apparently part of some soccer event Delta Force is doing. Probably for the World Cup, I guess, I don't know, I don't watch sports. But while I was waiting to extract, I saw a soccer ball in the corner, which I quickly picked up and threw in the goal, earning myself one more piece of loot right before I left. And in the end, I had earned myself 448,000 Technic Alloy from that raid. And honestly, I was kinda hoping for a bit more. Though to be fair, I literally didn't see a single other person, so maybe it would have been better if admin was more crowded. Anyway, when I got back to base, the loot I sold, along with some quests I completed by literally just having money, brought me to over 9 million Technic Alloy. So we're still way behind. Now for Raid 3, it's hard for me to tell if I succeeded or not, and here's what I mean by that. The loot I found was honestly pretty good, and after a little searching around, my safe box alone was worth almost 100,000. and then I died. My reaction times are just straight up abysmal, but there was a silver lining. This was the most loot I'd ever made it out with without actually extracting. But even that wasn't really a flex. Let's just go to Raid 4. For my fourth game, I actually head to Lyoli Grove instead of Zero Dam, hoping to get some use out of a new keycard I had. And while I didn't spawn near where I could use said keycard, I did spawn next to the Havoc Lab, which I figured, given the fact that the whole area was signal jammed and had a chance to spawn a boss, was probably a good spot to get some loot. And that was true. However, at one point while looting, I found this jammer item, which I put in my safe box in place of this USB drive. But I must not have been paying attention when swapping a less important item for that drive, because I ended up throwing out my surgical kit. So a minute later, while trying to recover from a fight with a machine gunner, I realized my mistake, but had no clue where my surgical kit was. I don't have a surgical kit? So for the remainder of the match, I had to continuously jab myself with my operator's healing ability in order to see properly as I sprinted for extraction. Oh. But just north of my extraction point was the train station where I could use my keycard, and since I was supposed to be taking risks in this video, I headed up to the station, unlocked the ticket office, and found out that the loot was severely underwhelming. So I just left without taking anything. But by selling all the non-underwhelming items I collected, I brought my balance to 9.587 million Technic Alloy before the next match. And speaking of the next match, it was the most insane loot run I've ever had. I spawned right next to admin, and I planned to take full advantage of that blessing. Starting with the building next to admin once again, things were already going pretty well. Ooh. And after venturing inside the main facility, I quickly dispatched this guard and found myself in this room. I thought it had already been looted at first because the door on the opposite side was wide open, but all the containers were unopened, and inside this lab coat, I found this. Oh my gosh! Oh! What? Afterwards, I slowly made my way to the second floor, where I found a few more decent items and eliminated another player, who luckily wasn't a real person and did no damage to me. Then I looted a safe, which brought the raid's value to over 600,000, higher than I'd ever achieved before, and after reaching 650k, I thought about leaving so I didn't lose all the loot I had on me. But luckily I ignored the sensible option and searched just a little longer. Oh my gosh. What? Eventually, though, I did pull the switch to activate the elevator and immediately headed over, hoping and praying that nobody followed me. But even minutes from my departure, the game wasn't done giving me loot yet. Just like in Raid 2, I threw the soccer ball by the elevator into the nearby goal, expecting to maybe receive a purple tier item worth no more than 20k. Instead, this happened. Oh, wait, that's worth a ton. And that tiny bit of last-minute looting brought me from over 750,000 to 900,000 Technic Alloy, making it officially my greatest raid yet, though I only have 2 more days to top it. Back at base, I listed all the most valuable items on the auction, and slowly began collecting my rewards. I also passed 10 million Technic Alloy, and the quest for that gave me another 200k. And after listing my final items, I was up to 10.2 million, and the military control terminal I found hasn't even sold yet. Okay, so I was about to transition to the next day of the challenge by saying, now the military control terminal has sold, but it literally hadn't sold yet when I started recording, and it only had like 16 minutes left before the auction listing ended. Luckily, it did sell while I was in the next raid, but it still ruined my corny segue. Alright, here's Raid 6. Thrilled with the success I had last raid, I tried to make Raid 6 go exactly the same, but unfortunately I just wasn't as lucky. I spawned next to admin and got inside quickly, sure, but the loot I found, even in the seemingly higher value containers, was just kinda meh. I got into a short fight with another operator, but it seems someone else finished them off before I could, which kinda makes sense as their teammates were nowhere to be seen. until slightly later when I was attacked while collecting some military intel. It's a good thing I'm on easy mode because no real player would have messed up an ambush like that. Following that interaction, I found a safe which had a fancy gold tier item inside, and apart from that, the only good item I found was this weird egg figurine from a random storage box. If you've seen the second video of this series, you know that these are often worth checking, even on easy mode. Before leaving, I wanted to tackle one of the tasks that was available for this match, which involved planting some explosives inside the admin building. Besides the enemy team that was in my way initially, the mission seemed fairly easy at first, but what I failed to realize was that the owners of the building might actually try to disarm the bomb. After that failure, I spent some time in the underground section of the admin area, but heard some footsteps up the staircase. However, after eliminating that operator, I kept hearing more footsteps upstairs, and couldn't figure out if they were their teammates or just random NPC guards. I felt trapped, and before I knew it, there were only 5 minutes left in the match. I desperately searched the subfloor for another exit, and luckily, I found one, completely evading what could have been a deadly confrontation. I sprinted across the map for an extraction point, escaping with less than 2 minutes to spare, and with only one raid remaining, I was sitting at 11.2 million Technic-Alloy, which is still nowhere near enough. In case you can't tell by this point, I've basically given up any hope of reaching my goal of 15 million, and because of this, I decided to make the final raid of a challenge on a map I'd never played before, for cash, just for fun. After all, it doesn't matter if I die if I'm going to lose anyway. But after waiting for 15 minutes and still not getting a match, I settled for 0 dam on normal mode. And for old time's sake, I looted the containers behind the admin building, just like in my first few raids of the series. And the loot was definitely better on this difficulty. But after collecting a little bit more random stuff from random places, including one more use of that keycard I had, the loot still wasn't that good, I extracted for the 28th and final time and accepted the loss. Except I had one more trick up my sleeve. When I returned home, I had more to sell than what I'd just collected. You see, throughout the entirety of this challenge, I've been saving up all of these gear tickets, the majority of which could be exchanged for 40,000 Technic-Alloy, and some of which were worth like 3 times that. But that's not all. I also had this one lucky pack, which gave me a lamp worth 90k, and a boatload of armament selection packs I'd been collecting that gave me some really good equipment that I could use for future raids. But instead I sold it all because I'm greedy. But even after collecting the last of my auction rewards, I only made it to 13,137,828 Technic-Alloy. After all I'd sacrificed from repair kits to armor to guns, I was still almost 2 million short of my goal. But that's okay, because you know what's even better than 15 billion Technic-Alloy? You liking and subscribing. I already said that in my intro. Thank you for watching this series. Make sure to comment what games or challenges you want to see next, and have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.